Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Paul from Refocus Coaching, and this is my live chat today with a dad in business to talk about how they kind of manage their energy and their health whilst they're juggling lots and spinning lots of plates. And I help dads in that sort of position to improve their energy and focus, improve their health, and lose that excess body fat in a sustainable way. And so today I'm joined by Ben Hazeldine. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi guys, thanks Paul. My name is Ben Hazeldine. I founded a coaching company called Future Stars Coaching back in 2009, which back then we had 5 different after school clubs that we were running. We now have around 1,700 hours of coaching and childcare that we provide a week, and coach over 25,000 children a week. So it's grown exponentially over the last 16 years. I also founded a charity under the name of my grandfather back in 2013, which works with disengaged, disaffected children, and has gone on to win national awards in that sector. I own a horse racing syndicate with 17 racehorses, and I suppose currently what I'm working on is we're now selling franchises of Future Stars Coaching across the UK. We've sold 3 over the last couple of months. And also I'm working on a diagnostic tool with some professional consultants, some business consultancy that I do, looking at culture, something called the Culture Dial, with my business partner. So that's going to launch in about a month's time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That is a lot. And just tell me how many, what's your family setup? How many kids have you got as well at the moment?
Yeah, I've been married for since 2015 to Frankie, and I've got 2 children. I've got a daughter, Ruby, who's 6, and a son, Harry, who's 3.
Okay. Whoa. So that is a lot.
When I say it feels like a lot.
Yeah, when you say it out loud, it's
yeah.
it is a lot. Yeah. Cool. So thanks for introducing yourself, and thanks for giving up a bit of time as well, because obviously time is a premium for you. So I'm going to sort of start off our chat by talking about how incredibly challenging it is to manage your health and your energy levels and your focus and your time, and all those things. Anyway. So when it comes to your health, is there anything that you've kind of struggled with over the years whilst trying to build all of this? Or anything you've gone on to spend any time working on that's you want to sort of share with us and talk about?
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to when I was in my kind of younger years, I was always kind of that really fit guy who played all the sport. I then was diagnosed when I was 10 with epilepsy, and I had that throughout, and I was on a lot of steroids at that point, so I put on a lot of weight. So it probably wasn't something that I used to think about, and then I put on, I think my mum used to call it puppy fat. So I was quite chunky then. No matter what I did, how much exercise I did, I kind of put some weight on. And then later on, I think once I founded the businesses, my first real struggle was sleep. I had about a year where I just couldn't ever get to sleep because my head was wandering and I had so many different ideas. Definitely slightly ADHD as well. So that didn't help, and my brain was just whirring. So yeah, I went through a period of 6 to 9 months of sleeping about 3 hours a night. And yeah, that's before kids. I mean, God knows what I would have done with kids and that. But yeah, so I went to see a specialist. I went to see a therapist, a holistic therapist. Basically, I saw her in the school playground. I was coaching her son's rugby, and she just said, "You look really tired, and you look more tired. Is everything okay?" And I was like, "I don't know what's going on, but I can't sleep." So I went to see her. I still see her now to this day, and I use her as just to pick up the phone. She's moved away a bit, but we still Zoom and stuff. She gave me a therapy, like a remedy, like a holistic remedy. And I was quite closed-minded to that kind of thing back then. And I remember speaking to my parents about it, and they were like, "Well, you may as well just give it a go." But don't know if it's going to work. And whatever it was, I think it had a fair bit of magnesium in it actually, but it worked. And I think that was my first real big struggle. That was kind of my big struggle. I also stopped. I played a lot of rugby until I was about 27 years old. I had one shoulder reconstructed, then I had the other one was supposed to be reconstructed if I went back and played rugby. So I then stopped playing rugby as well around that time, and I just naturally put on some weight as well from just not playing rugby on a Saturday, training on a Tuesday, training on a Thursday. I was kind of, for the first time ever, not in that routine of constantly training with the team. So I don't know if they were linked at all. They probably were, but yeah, I did really struggle with my sleep.
Yeah. Oh, and sleep's a big one as well, isn't it? It's a, if you struggle with it, it becomes a stressor and a stress point, and then you get more anxious about it, and then you spend time thinking about it, and then when you're trying to go to bed to go to sleep, you're stressing because you're probably not going to sleep, and then it just sort of, you get in this whole crazy loop.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and what was the? It was a great chance meeting, then, wasn't it? With this person who's helped you out and now become a part of your kind of extended team, I guess. What was it that they did? And so you said about a remedy. Was it like a drink or a pill, or what sort of thing was it?
It was these little tablets that you used to put on your tongue, and then there was some stuff that you had to put in water as well. And it completely depends. Like, I've seen her now for blimey about 12 years, I suppose, and each time it's something different. So it could be something that she links back to your kidneys. It could be something that she links back to being overwhelmed. I think her biggest saying to me is, Ben, just remember you're not a robot. You're trying to do everything that you're doing. And then from then I kind of, that opened me up to kind of going a bit deeper about my childhood and different things that happened during that time. And it kind of then just became counselling, really, in terms of talking about what was going on. I was probably masking a lot with bad diet and alcohol, to be honest, at that point. And yeah, I went through that journey, and I think, look, once you started that journey and you go into it, I think you naturally carry on with it quite a lot of the time, and I've just probably gone deeper and deeper over the years since that as well.
Yeah. I mean, this sort of resonates with me as well, because I kind of had sleep issues, but mine was sort of self-inflicted. I think in so much as I was working really long hours. It was mostly sitting either in a vehicle or at a desk, and then I was kind of trying to medicate and soothe myself, with alcohol outside of that, or using it to go to sleep. But actually, looking back now, I know that even though when you have an alcoholic drink, it feels like you go to sleep more easily, I know now that the quality of sleep is destroyed almost. So it's another way of getting stuck in a bit of a rut, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's always the same. It's really hard to train when you're tired. And it's actually, I found it really difficult to eat well when you're tired, and I probably wasn't educated enough at that point in terms of, I don't know if like some people might know what I'm talking about, but when you were training so much for sport at a fairly decent level, like I didn't really focus or was very well educated on my diet and what I was putting in my body. I just kind of naturally looked quite fit because of the amount of exercise I was doing. I didn't really even have to think about it. So I think it wasn't until you kind of stop playing that and you're out of that circle where suddenly, I don't know, I reckon I put a stone on within the first year that I stopped playing rugby, and not a good stone, I can assure you. And then it wasn't until that point of going, wow, actually, okay, I need to work out what I'm putting in my body and then how I'm going to look after myself as well without that competition. I think competition is always, it kind of, I can always strive for something if I've got a target. Whereas without that and without the regular games and being around a team, definitely hit me more than I probably realised at the times.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that catches a lot of people out. So a lot of the guys I work with have used sport in the past and been in part of a team or a club, and then obviously when I'm working with guys who are sort of in their 40s, and so maybe that's now not a part of their life anymore, and that transition is actually quite difficult because, like you said, when you're going training twice a week or more, you're playing a game every week or more, you've got that competitive element as well, so you're and obviously when you're younger, your metabolism is a little bit better, you've got a bit more resilience to bounce back, you can tough it out a bit more easily. So all of those things combined together, when you suddenly lose that, it can be quite a big hit. And then, you know, we've sort of segued into talking about nutrition as well, which is, you know, my mostly what I do. And I find, again, when you're younger, when you're competitive at some sort of sports, you can kind of mask poor nutrition in a way, because you've just got that, you know, sheer young power and resilience to just power through it no matter what you're doing to your body. And actually, it's not until you sort of get into a bit of a state where you sit back and look at it and think, oh gosh, you know, I could have actually been a better athlete had I looked at this.
100%. I think for me, like anyone who played with me, and you'll probably laugh at this, knowing you played a bit of rugby with me, like my defence was non-existent, to be completely honest with you. I tried my best to get out of the way. So I think definitely, like, if I'd learned a bit more about that, I kind of miss that era where, like, it was always said when we were younger, like as a teenager, like it's bad to go in the gym, like, because it wasn't good for you. And I just kind of rolled with that and never really committed well enough to the gym. And I think if I had committed well to the gym, obviously would have thought about my diet a little bit more, and definitely, I don't know, look, I might have protected my shoulders a bit more if I had a bit more muscle on them as well. So missed that boat. But in a way from a rugby perspective, probably really good for me and my relationships as well, whether that's work or with my wife, probably good for me to get out of that kind of setting and being absorbed in it. I think it becomes quite unhealthy when you're that passionate about it and quite obsessive, and your group of friends predominantly stays with the same group of friends that you play rugby with, which, don't get me wrong, is great, and I still see a lot of them now, and it's brilliant to see them and go for a curry the other week with them. But I probably got a lot from that in terms of being able to focus on the business more at that point.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, isn't it? Because when you're in that, especially in a club setting like that, and I know obviously from playing rugby myself, when you start a business, this is quite useful to still be in that club setting, because you're networked in a sense with other people. You can bounce ideas off people. You can get feedback. You might even win some business potentially. In that area. But there are those potential downsides of it's more social than professional, and therefore perhaps, you know, alcohol consumption might be higher, or your nutritional choices might be slightly different. And then as you age, that starts to become a bit more obvious, because you've lost that slightly different metabolism from being young. You've lost that bounce back ability from being younger. Your joints and your muscles ache a bit more from from the activities. So I think if you don't make a sort of intentional effort to look at that stuff and to think about how you're managing your body and your health and how you're feeding and fueling yourself, then maybe it's, that's when people start to really slip.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It's definitely something I've had to concentrate, become a lot more conscious of. Even the feeling of when you eat something poor now, like I said about going for a curry or a big meal, like I actually feel it. Whereas when I was younger, you just eat whatever and I don't know, you jump back up and you crack on and you go again. Whereas even now with age, definitely when I turned 30, there was a noticeable kind of change in terms of my sensitivity around all of that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was going to ask, so I sort of work with my clients on 4 main pillars. So I look at nutrition, obviously. I look at their movement, so exercise, how much they move around and walk through the day. I look at recovery and rest, so the way they sleep and relax, and I'm looking at mindset. So we've obviously touched on a few of those things. So I want to kind of start to shift towards mindset a little bit. So, how do you, when you made that transition out of that sort of younger self and you started to build the business, and obviously had a relationship and started to think about building a family, what were the sort of key mindset shifts there for you, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I've always been committed and I've always loved a challenge. So even growing up, I remember when I was a teenager, like setting a challenge around me press ups I could do, and I'd write out a plan for 30 days of how many I've got to do each day to achieve my numbers that I wanted to get to. So I've always had that. But I think the shift was probably at that point from speaking to a counsellor as well, that I kind of had quite a victim mentality. I don't know whether when I started the business I was doing it for myself or doing it more to kind of try and make my parents proud or try and make out something of loving the attention or the name of owning a business or whatever. So I think there was a definite shift of me realizing that I am the only one that can controls me, and if I want to do something good, that's completely down to me. There's a couple of key moments. I had a couple of friends who one lad who Paul Thorogood, who passed away, who I was good friends with, and I remember that really hitting the mark of when you were a young adult. We played five-side football on the Sunday. On the Monday, he went to work, and unfortunately, he had an accident at work and passed away that day. And I think the reality for me then was actually you're not here forever. Whereas when you're younger, you kind of think, well, yeah, that won't happen to me, and you're just going to be here forever. And that was definitely the spark of going. A year later, I went, let's go out and actually do this, and found this business. So I think that had a huge part to play at that point. And I think then later on down the line, just instead of me trying to make out those other people's fault, just that reality of actually, let's look at me first rather than looking at someone else. So I think if you combine the kind of competitiveness that I've got linked with the obsessiveness that you've got, and then the targets of loving setting a target, I still every single year now will set objectives on loads of different stuff, relationships, finance, professional, education, and I will literally state exactly what I want to do, how I want to achieve it, and then a plan of how I'm going to get there. So I've always kind of had that in me, but I think that that victim mentality shifted, and now I definitely say by the time I was probably not until I was 30, so that was 9 years ago. I'm 39 now. Of that genuine reality of that I'm doing it to make myself happy rather than doing it to probably make my mum and dad proud. I know it sounds corny, but to start with, to try and get that reassurance from them.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think to that point of kind of setting yourself some objectives for a year, I think, a lot of people kind of do it, but if you actually write it down and actually kind of set some mini targets to get there, kind of reverse engineer it a little bit and actually really properly plan it, then you're more likely to achieve it. Because I think, I talk to a lot of people, guys especially, who have a plan, but it's just in here and it's not, they've not sort of realized it in any way. And even actually just telling someone someone whose opinion you value, actually saying it out loud, and then it's not until you say it out loud or even get some feedback on it that you actually think, oh, can I do that? How am I going to do that? And you start to actually flesh it out a little bit. So I'm a big believer in writing things down and actually making that commitment and trying to reverse engineer it, because if you just have a lofty goal in mind and it's a big thing, it's up here, if you don't break down the steps of how you're going to get there, you're not going to get anywhere near it. And that can be quite defeating as well. Then you can get partway through a year and think, well, I've made absolutely zero progress towards that thing. So you sort of give up, I
think there's a stat I read years ago of something like you've got 40% more chance to achieve a goal if you write it down than if you just keep it in your head. I think there's also another stat. I use social media a little bit for that. I know I do with the gym. You probably see that in terms of just the accountability of posting once a week a picture of in the gym of where I am, of what I'm trying to do. And there's higher stats on that once you share it to the world as well, in terms of your likelihood of achieving those targets. So definitely a firm believer of that. I suppose on that other side as well, I've really got obsessive with walking 10,000 steps a day. And I've done that now for the last 3 years, where it's got to be over 10,000 steps a day that I walk, and that's kind of a non-negotiable for me. But it all ties into those plans as well. I love writing it down. I love spending a day on my own planning all of that, all of those targets.
Do you write? Are you someone that sort of journals or writes a diary, or do you have a daily process?
Yeah, so I've used this thing called a self journal. It's called Self Journal. I think it's by the Best Self Company. No, it is by the Best Self Company. I've used it for around 8 years, which they're kind of a book for every 3 months, and then it basically is a diary as well, including it. So each day you will write down what your plan is for that day, but also that links with your goals of how does that help you achieve your goals. And then with a bit of reflection, it's got two ones. It's got a morning one, like midday one, and then an evening one. I don't tend to do the midday one, being completely honest, but I do the evening one of just it just does take you back to a bad moment isn't a bad day, when you write out the things that you've got gratitude for. So yeah, probably in my younger years I would have looked at probably with a bit of judgment on that and gone, flipping out, what's all that about? But it is something that I've loved for the last 8 years, and I know I bought all my team it as well in the office at one point years ago, saying, look, here's one of these, try it. And actually a guy that I'm meeting up with in a couple of weeks, Harry, he's got a job now in London in recruitment, and he's doing really well, and he still uses it to this day. A different one. Hopefully he's bought another one, but he still uses the same thing. So that's quite nice to hear.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm fascinated by that whole part of that psychology, because I'm big on accountability, which is, sharing your goal with somebody else so that they're expecting you to do the things you said you were going to do, versus writing it down and it's just you that's seeing it, and yet it still definitely works. It's fascinating, isn't it? I've not read in great detail about how that works, but it certainly seems to work. And I guess if you're also making that effort, you're probably more likely to share your goals and even your mini goals for a week with your wife or your business partners or people that you're with anyway, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think maybe actually subconsciously on that, it then naturally enables you to break stuff down and probably land things with people a lot easier, because actually instead of just going, I don't know, at the moment we've got an objective that we want to sell 10 franchises over the next academic year, and we're on 5, hopefully 6 today. Actually, there's someone coming in hopefully today to buy one. To have a new area. If you just said, oh, by next year we're going to have 10, like how does that land with different people who've got to do different roles within the organization? Whereas actually when you can break out that plan and go, don't worry about 10, but actually can we break it down, and in the next month could you work on this, like the operations manual, finance, could you look at how we're going to take the bookings in and how that flows through the organization into the right account, and then ultimately ends up with that business owner. So without breaking that down, it's really difficult to land and articulate and have clarity on, really.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what this sort of thing does, is when you're doing your journal and your daily reviews, I think that's exactly what you're doing, aren't you? You're breaking everything down into smaller, easier to kind of digest and understand chunks. You rationalize your thoughts a little bit, and I think the whole process just becomes a little bit easier. So it's definitely worth that investment and that time.
Yeah, 100% on everything as well. They like health and fitness exactly the same. A couple of years, I went back to the gym 2 years ago now, when Ruby had started, my daughter had started school, and again it was like, I know I've got a long way to go to get to where I want to go, but actually when you break it down of going, look, this month I want to lose 1 kilogram, this is how I'm going to do it, I'm going to concentrate on the steps, I'm going to drink more water, I'm going to eat more protein in each meal, suddenly it's easier to tick it off and go, I've achieved that now, rather than I need to lose a stone and a half and get back to where I was 5 years ago. Like, without that breaking down, it probably, I don't know sometimes in my head whether I'd even start without breaking it down, because it would seem like a dream rather than a plan.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. There's I guess this sort of ties into what you're doing with your daily journal, where you're writing and keeping your notes. When I run a free 5-day event for dads who are sort of thinking about making some changes and maybe have struggled in the past, and one of the things I get them to do is do 3 basic things every day. So that's try and have 3 round solid meals a day with whole foods, try and get some more movement in, and try and hydrate well. And I sort of say to them, make those 3 basics, and I get them to draw a grid out of the 3 things and the 7 days, and just tick each time they do one of those things over the week, and just try and aim to tick like 17 boxes in a week.
Yeah, nice.
And it's a really quick, so you can get to Thursday, have a quick look at this little grid, and if you're on target or not, and then you can make a decision, make a change. So again, I think that visual aid and that act of ticking things off or writing things down, again, really plays into it quite nicely, even when it's just keeping it simple.
No, I like that a lot. I think one of my challenges, and still is my obsessive kind of tendencies around it as well. So I think that would really help for that, in terms of not getting carried away and actually allowing, maybe, okay, we said we wanted however many over the week, but actually let's not be obsessive of not every single day, because I think I always need that kind of, my therapist would call it a day of no expectation, really. And for years I didn't have a clue what they were even on about when they tried to explain it to me, but it was really around, I was like, okay, so I'm going to do nothing that day, and they're like, no, you're still going to do everything you want to do, but just do what you want to do, rather than every day you're like, I've got this plan, I want to do this, I've got to have this meeting, I've got to walk these steps, I've got to eat well, I've got to do this in the business. It was just go and do what you want to do, and you can go and do some work, you can not do some work, but kind of try and have those days, hopefully now once a month, that is no expectation. Otherwise I just literally keep going and keep going.
And I think it's really important to build that in deliberately, I think, because you can't, if you think about it like this, you can't be perfect all the time. It's impossible. Especially when you've got a lot going on, you've got so many plates you're spinning at the same time. There's always going to be something that's going to drop. So I think your expectations should be set. And what I always try and do when I work with people is sort of say, look, 75%, maybe 80% of the time, lean more towards optimal. And then you've still got that time to be suboptimal. But overall, in the long term, your goal is still going to be attained. I think you've got to try and build that in. That it's like a little bit of self-protection, because you cannot be perfect all the time. It's just not possible.
No, it's a really good point.
Yeah. Cool. So I was going to ask you, is there any individual person or a certain book or a system or a podcast or anything that's really heavily influenced you or that's really helped you that you want to kind of shout out or mention?
Yeah, I obviously talked about the self-journal, which has been key from a book side. I suppose on people, my dad and granddad, if I'm completely honest. I always looked up to my dad, definitely from a sporting perspective. He was he ended up running in the English schools, final for 800 meters, and then got a cap for Bristol, but unfortunately when he was 18, and then did his ACL, and that was kind of a career over, but then he went and played 900 odd games for his local rugby club. So definitely my dad from that side. My dad wouldn't mind me saying he's quite a quiet man. He's a very gentle man, and he's quite a quiet and reserved man. So I definitely looked up to him in a way of like kind of ultimate role model still to this day, especially as a dad. Like, he's my biggest role model on that side. And then my granddad from a different way. So my dad's dad, who I founded the charity after, really just in a different way. My granddad was a talker, and for whatever reason, he tied me into behaving in a set way and linked that through sport and linked that through he was really open. There was no judgment. Like, you could just talk to him about whatever, say what you've done wrong, and there was no like, oh, you failed or you've done this. You could just relax, and we'd sit opposite each other, probably watching Only Fools and Horses, and just talk to each other about life, and there was no judgment. And he's probably, I'd say, the only person really back when I was a youngster that I'd open up to. So yeah, both of them role models, but actually in quite different ways, even though it's father and son, which is quite odd. And I'd probably definitely 50% my dad and 50% of my mum as well. So definitely those two. From a book, I read something called The One Thing, which I don't live by, as you can hear from all the things that I'm doing, but it was a really kind of prominent read in terms of just, if you're going to do something really well, concentrate on that one thing and make it simple. And even earlier when we talked about those plans in terms of breaking it down of what is the one thing I need to do this day, what's the one thing I need to do this week, and then breaking it down into a real simplistic plan. So yeah, those landed with me. And just from a podcast point of view, Diary of the CEO, I listen to all the time, and a guy called Gary V, who had loads of podcasts out there. There are a couple of podcasts that I always still listen to now as well.
Yeah, it's nice that you've had those influences that you've lived with as well, because you don't just get an hour of their time here and there. You're exposed to that leadership model, that behavior, for all of the time, which is fantastic, isn't it? So
yeah, Yeah,
really
really
nice.
lucky, really lucky. Like, do you know what I mean? Like lucky and blessed in terms of the childhood. Yeah, in terms of where I was born, in terms of the family that I was born into, and in terms of how they are as leaders as well. So yeah, look, you can't choose that, and I realise just how fortunate I am
Yeah.
from that side as well, which is definitely, I think, sets you up in your 20s to kind of flourish. Whereas I think working with a lot of some consultancy that I'm doing with lots of business owners, there's obviously things that they're probably still trying to sort in their 20s when they become adults, or look at or change behaviors based on upbringing, and later than that as well. And some people never deal with it because if they just carry on that cycle. So yeah, really privileged and lucky and blessed on that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So I was going to ask you about any daily non-negotiables. So have you got any? You know, you've touched on a couple of little bits, but have you got any sort of daily non-negotiables that you absolutely always deliver on?
Yeah, 10,000 steps is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
If you're going to say something, you do it. But I am very good at saying no now, whereas I used to say yes way too much. So yeah, but if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. And the other one is picking up the kids or dropping them off at school twice a week. I know my dad would massively regret that. He was a teacher. Didn't ever used to get me to come watch sport or really pick me up or drop me off from school. And yeah, I think from not having that, I just realised for me that is a non-negotiable. That yeah, at least a couple of times a week I'm doing drop off and pick up. So yeah, those are those. And I think the other thing that I really have to take stock of is I can get a lot into my own head. So actually taking a step out and planning in time to stop in between meetings, rather than walking from a meeting to a meeting and you take the emotion from one meeting in the other, is just something I'm really aware of now. So I always will allocate at least quarter of an hour or a little walk to do before I go into the next thing, rather than taking the energy from one thing, which might be negative, might be positive, might be whatever. You don't know what it's going to be, but actually stopping and then taking that and refreshing before you go and meet the next person.
Yeah, I love that. That's really important. I was invited as a guest on a talk a couple of weeks ago about the topic of kind of preserving your energy around work. And I didn't just go and talk about nutrition. One of my suggestions was don't allow back-to-back meetings, build in time to protect yourself, because you're exactly right. You could go from a meeting that's really like high energy or really charged, and then you walk into something else that's completely different level, completely different group of people, and you've got to somehow unwind yourself and then get into that frame of mind. It's not good for you. It's not good for them.
No.
So I think that's really important point.
I think I don't like we've got an office here in Clevedon, and we've got 15, 16 desks in it, like for the people, like the admin team and all the management. But I don't actually have a desk in the office. The reason being is that I just find when I'm here, like I give it my all, but I've got to be away from the office to let them flourish. Like they're better than me at doing their part of the job that they need to do. But obviously naturally people can rely on you when you're around to come in and ask you something that probably if they thought, should I pick up the phone and ring him, they might think, well, actually no, I don't really need to, because that's not that important. I can just crack on with it. The challenge for me is even here, I'll walk out of the office in a minute and suddenly it'll be, oh, actually, have you got 2 minutes or have you got 5 minutes? And I really struggle with that in terms of, I know I can be really blunt, and I'm absorbed in what's going on up there all the time with everything that's going on. And I think that's a real challenge. That is my biggest challenge, in terms of to be respectful, but to show patience and empathy when people are trying to grab me at a time that isn't the time that is allocated. As I've said before, I'm really planned. I'm really strategic. So yeah, just to chuck this in when my schedule's already pretty full anyway, it doesn't land that well for them or me, really.
Yeah, that's tricky. It makes me think back to what you said earlier as well about allowing yourself time when you don't have anything going on. So in a way, it would be nice if you could have that during a week where you could just be around the office and be interrupted and have those catch-ups and things. But it doesn't work like that, really, does it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I'm very good at giving myself there's 2 mornings a week that I'll have booked out for the gym, and then an hour to have a coffee and just usually read or listen to a podcast. So I'm good at that, but that's a really good point. It's something that I've not thought about. Just having an afternoon where I've not got anything set on, but actually being sat in it so people can pick my brains, I suppose, in that way, but at a time that is suitable. Look, my especially to my management, my phone's there for me, and they know that at some point during the day I'll phone them back if they give me a call, and they know within 24 hours I'll email them back. It's just that in the moment, which is when you're that busy with life, it's tricky at times.
It certainly is. Yeah. Right, I'm really conscious of time because it's been a fab conversation, and we've gone sailing past the half an hour mark. Is there anything you wanted to kind of bring up or ask or discuss before we wrap things up?
I suppose from me to you would be, obviously, with your knowledge and what you've got, is that I've worked really hard the last 2 years to kind of get that weight off, and I've now hit the target. I wanted to be below 90 kg, and I actually went down to about 88 kg. And I always did everything in weight, which stupidly probably now. But then since I've been training harder, obviously my weight's crept up, but not necessarily bad weight, but more muscle. So I suppose my question to you is, what would you recommend to me to track in terms of that? Like, obviously the gym that I go to has all the scales of body fat percentage, visceral fat, all of that. Obviously knowing that I can get quite obsessive about it as well. And I don't want to be obsessive about, I still to this day stand on a scale every morning, which I know I shouldn't do, but I do. So yeah, just your take on that of how should I look at it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So again, I think I agree with you. I wouldn't want anyone to become obsessive about one particular metric. And body weight can alter very dramatically for a variety of different reasons, not just because of excess fat that we are holding on to, for example. There was actually, over Christmas last year, over the Christmas holiday, I did a really interesting experiment where I weighed myself 18 times through a 24-hour period, and my weight variance was 3.1 kilos in 24 hours.
Wow.
And I knew that would happen, but even doing it still blew me away because I didn't quite expect it to be so wildly varied in a day.
Yeah.
And there's lots going on. So the biggest increase in weight wasn't from eating food. It was actually during a gym session. So I went and did a really heavy lifting session, and I gained like 2.4 kilos of weight. Okay. I drank 700 ml of water, but that's 700 grams. So I sort of that act of lifting heavy and getting that pump that you get, and your body then sorting out all the nutrients and hydration, you actually, you end up weighing a little bit more after a session. And then I came home, I sat on my backside, I ate a huge bowl of yogurt and seeds and jam, had another 700 ml of water, and then I lost 1.8 kilos. And so even though I knew the science behind that and why that would happen, it still surprised me on the scale. But there's lots going on. There's hormones happening, there's hydration status, and that's affected by salts and fats that you've consumed through the day. There's quality of food, that some food's more fibrous, so therefore it takes longer to go through your digestive system, therefore it's inside of you for longer. If you think about taking a plate of food and just resting on your shoulder, you're going to be heavier on the scale. So there's all these other little things going on. Sleep and stress can also affect how your body holds its water as well. So there's a lot going on. So in terms of taking a measurement or a metric, I like to look at something a bit simpler, like you've got a favorite shirt or a pair of jeans or a pair of shorts that you like, and whether they go on nice and easy or whether they're feeling a bit snug. And I kind of like to go with a bit of a feeling as well of energy levels. So, ideally, you're lifting in the gym, which is great. So you're probably feeling strong, feeling good. You need to feed your body adequately to recover from that, and also to have enough energy to go out and do it again. So I think the focus in terms of your nutrition should be on food quality more so than quantity. So not worrying about, am I eating too much or too little, but introduce as much quality as possible. So good quality proteins, whole foods as much as possible, and reducing down the hyper processed stuff. And then it's about a feeling. Are you getting out of bed in the morning ready to put your feet on the ground, or are you feeling a bit sluggish? And maybe that's something you can add to your journal, how you felt in the morning
just
when you wake
thinking
up.
that, yeah.
And then it's, I'd say probably a favorite shirt, or a shirt that you feel good in, that's your measure. When you put that on, do you feel good? Or are you feeling a bit self-conscious? And maybe that's where you start to make your adjustments, is around things like that, rather than worrying about the number on the scale.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I like that.
Yeah. When it comes to sort of measuring body fat levels and things, I'd say that's an okay thing to do, but try and use the same machine or same piece of equipment every time, because they vary as well. You get on one in boots and it'll be different from the one in the gym, So just use the same one every time.
Yeah, wicked. No, the gym's just changed there, so there was a bit of a shock when they bought their new machine out. Do you know what I mean? But it's always the same one now, so that's good. Wicked. I appreciate that.
Cool. Look, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I've not seen any comments or questions coming in live, so if anyone has got anything, then please put it in to LinkedIn or on YouTube afterward, and Ben and I can catch up with that afterwards. If people want to get in touch with you, find out what you're doing, find out what you're up to, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I'm pretty prominent on all my socials. So under my name, Ben Hazeldine on LinkedIn. It will come up with the business owner, charity founder, and consultant on LinkedIn. So please do link with me on LinkedIn, and happy to have a chat from there, whether it's anything from consultancy or culture or sports coaching, or racehorse. I can help with all of those.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We didn't actually talk about racehorses, did we? That's a fascinating subject, but maybe for another chat.
That's probably for another one. We could go on for a while there. Right?
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much again, Ben. It's been awesome to have you on. Have a good rest of the day.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thanks.